The Hangout on air is live. All right. Yeah, so I'm guessing Nicole is coming, and you said Nicole that Leonie got the message, so I guess we just give it a few minutes.
Okay.
And see what's going on. Did you enjoy this chapter?
Yes, I did. It was funny. It was a type of thing where you have to read and then percolate and see where you differ from where they are. And so it was funny. It was just like when I first read it, I was like, oh, that's an interesting perspective. I can get that. I can get with that. I can get with that. I can get with that. And then the next day I was like, oh, wait a minute. What about this then? So, and then I was saying to myself, you got too many questions, so you can't add any more. So I just decided I'd not add 2 or 3 more.
Yeah. It for me, it was like listening in on a group of young men having the same kind of dialogues we used to have at that age, right?
Yes.
Like, does the story ever change?
Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Nicole. How are you all?
We're good. How you doing?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Let me see if I can pull up my Google Drive here.
So yeah, that's what it felt like to me. Like we are just stuck in one big circular conversation. And then even the one on Mary Jane and comparing her real life story to her fictional story was like, we just the same issues. So I don't know, I guess it's human. I don't know.
I love that they have a little less taboo about certain things than we did.
Mm-hmm.
Because your reputation was all you had. I think I was probably the last generation of women who had to maintain such a high reputation.
Yeah.
Even though nobody really did. It's just that we wanted to have the appearance of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you get started?
Yeah. Yeah, whenever you're ready, Kim.
I thought you say something first, but I can.
Yeah.
Huh? Okay.
Yes, you start us off.
Well, welcome to the Feminist Reading Circle. Today we're reading the Crunk Feminist Collection, edited by Brittney C. Cooper, Susana M. Morris, and Robin M. Boylorn. And here's the book. And so first we want to go around the room and introduce ourselves. I'm Kim Brandon, and I am in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm facilitating tonight. Michelle?
And I am Michelle Odom, and also in Brooklyn, New York. And this is our book.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Wilson. I'm joining you from College Station, Texas.
Hi, Nicole. Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
The topic of the section we're reading tonight is love, sex, and relationships. Black feminist sex is the best sex ever. And it's from pages 187 to page 207. And in the introduction, it starts off by saying, Single, saved.
Kim, before you start, Leonie's just coming in.
Hello.
Hi, Leonie.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Hello.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi.
Certainly. Hello, everybody. My name is Leonie Smith, and I am from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, joining you today from Akron, Ohio.
Yay.
Oh,
So
wow.
Right, in the States.
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to read the titles of the blog posts that were in the book that we covered in this particular section, and that's Single, Saved, and Sexing, the Gospel of Getting Your Freak On. She Got a Big Ego, Thoughts on Dating with a Doctorate, Being Singled, on Mary Jane, Gabrielle Union, and those of us who are imperfect, and the glorification of the side chick. What's up with dudes not being able to give compliments? And finally, how Chris Brown is effing up my sex life. And so if somebody wouldn't mind reading the introduction for us, it's those 3 paragraphs.
I'll read it.
Oh, thank you.
We seem to need feminism most in our intimate lives. Despite stereotypes of feminists being anti-sex, we know feminists put it down in the bedroom, and we proclaim, as our friend Alexis Pauline Gumbs once did in the comment section of one of our dating posts, that Black feminist sex is the best sex ever. Fuck what you heard. But giving ourselves permission, this is a quote, but giving ourselves permission to ask for what we need, to be creative in the building of our intimate lives, and be unapologetic about the work of centering our own pleasure, rarely as glamorous or orgiastic as it sounds. Feminism can mess up your sex life because sometimes, as Cruntastic points out, your partner can say sexist ass shit. It's not agreement unequivocally that violence against women is wrong, then letting the dissenting party get the draws. End quote. In this section, our Crunk feminists highlight the unapologetic pleasure of intimate connections. They talk about their own internalized myths and beliefs that had to be overcome in order to liberate their bodies sexually. The boundaries to intimacy were still formidable.
Thank you, Michelle. You were fading in and out as you were reading. I don't know if other people had a problem missing a couple of words.
I didn't have that issue. I could hear
good.
her.
Okay. So it's just me. All right, then. So anything else before we jump into the first question? I have 7 questions. All right. Mm-hmm. When Christianity holds women to a higher standard than men in church or the preachers themselves, do we need a bigger view of God, or is something else afoot here? Any thoughts?
Well, Brittney Cooper, first essay, Saved and Sexin, the Gospel of Getting Your Freak On. One thing I find interesting about this book is I feel like I'm starting to get to know the voices of the different writers. To me, that was classic Brittney. And I was glad to see that she found a bigger view of God. I agree. I you know, if the question is, do we need a bigger view of God, or is something else afoot here? I would say no. The answer is a bigger view. So she found a view that helped her. What's the word I'm looking for? Helped her see the sexual side of herself as human and natural and positive and right. And if there's a God out there who made us sexual beings, then it would seem to make sense to me. You know, that there's some positive aspect of it. So yeah, I think the view is I think the answer is a bigger view.
Yeah, I think also like the fact that Western traditions in general, and Christianity in particular, there is always this notion of a masculine God or a male God. And so it's so much easier to continue to grapple and contend with policing women. Because I think that's what it largely boils down to, especially when Cooper points out something that's very important, that though these pastors and ministers are putting forth that rhetoric toward, and it's, you know, women are the receivers of this type of rhetoric, always in the position to receive, but they themselves are not necessarily practicing celibacy. And so there's just something so frustrating and unethical for me about that, that there is this kind of understanding that he needs that intimacy, that contact, as they describe it in the book, skin to skin. But a woman would not need that either. And I just marvel at the women who kind of get into the competitive, I guess I would call it, roll calling at the church to say, oh, well, I've been celibate 5 years. Well, I've been celibate 10 years, you know. And I'm wondering I would have liked an extension of this essay. I think I would have liked, but I know it was not a component of that, some like extended discussions of how does that present? How does not being touched for so many years, and how did it present itself in those day-to-day interactions?
Well, I was surprised that there are apparently still so many women out there who accept that kind of policing, and who carry the kind of guilt that she described. Young women. So I don't know if that's attributable to the Southern environment, or maybe it's happening right here in my own backyard. I don't know. You know, being a part of the church experience. It was not a part of my experience growing up in the church. I didn't feel that kind of shaming going on, at least not at the level that she's talking about. So yeah, so it would be interesting to know how it presented itself. Nicole, I agree. Uh-oh.
We lost Kim.
We lost the moderator.
Oh no.
I was worried I was going to be the one to drop out because the computer has been on all day, on the internet all day. And normally, it has to have some kind of shutdown.
Oh, I didn't know that. Is that a laptop, Michelle, or a desktop?
It's a laptop, my brand new computer, and it like goes through this updating. Anyway, so I guess in Kim's absence, Leonie, did you have a reaction to that question?
I always have something to say.
I know.
So two things. One, the question about when Christianity holds. I don't think Christianity holds women to a higher standard. I think it's Christianity through the lens of patriarchy and misogyny. I mean, I read the Bible like a lot growing up because of the religious tradition that I was raised in but no longer in. And there certainly is misogyny within the scripture, but not around sexual behavior. I don't find there's a big difference in terms of what's expected from men and women. So that was one thing. And the other piece is that when she talked about like the preachers themselves not in church, not holding themselves, for me it links back to this larger conversation around sexual harassment, because who are the preachers having sex with? These virginal women, these women who are protecting themselves or saving themselves, I guess. And so I think that that part of her argument is framed a little bit too benignly for me, because I keep thinking, well, who are these preachers having sex with? It's not, they're not all going out to street corners. A lot of times they're shitting where they're eating where they're shitting. What is it? You know what I'm saying? So there's that as well. Like there's the, so things that go into the area of abuse or harassment or that as well that's happening within the church.
So Leonie, are you then saying that there's a fiction there that some of the women in the church who are maybe publicly or in that space, shall I say, claiming celibacy and are not? Or are you just saying that just there are some women in the church who are, not the preachers are and pastors are, dealing with those women who are not necessarily holding out? Is that what you're saying?
Possibly. It's harder to say for me because I have not had the religion that I grew up in is very like it doesn't have the same kind of imprints that like my understanding of the Black church does. I didn't grow up in a Black church. So but there certainly were people who slept with each other, who were not married to each other, people having sex before marriage, which wasn't which the scriptures would kind of frown on, and people stepping out on their husbands and wives or whatever. And I wonder if preachers are using their power, the hierarchical power that they have to engage in relationships with these women. There certainly have been scandals that I've heard of in this country, in the United States, around preachers doing that kind of thing, and not just in Christianity. There's that whole thing around what's that religion that Malcolm X did? The whole what is it, that Elijah Muhammad and getting a bunch of women pregnant and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the Nation of Islam.
Yeah, Nation of Islam. So I just wonder what. So yeah, it wasn't missing for me. It just raised up the question for me: is it as benign as preachers are stepping out? Who are they stepping out with? It just made me curious. Good to see you back, Kim.
Thank you.
Yes.
Question number 2. Did somebody read that? Hopefully I don't have any typos in it.
I can read that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, eyes wide open. Studying the landscape, feminists are not naive or blindsided by facts versus fiction in relationships, and must deal with the ways patriarchy and racism conspire against our ability to build loving connections with Black men. If you look at America as a fishbowl, looking in, what systems or traditions are the most problematic for Black feminists to make and maintain intimate connections and or long-term relationships?
Anybody?
I think people are looking for unicorns, man.
I know I am. Where's my uni?
Absolutely.
Why do you think that, Leonie?
I don't grow up around Black media, so but I grew up, you know, I've read like Ebony and Essence and all this kind of stuff like for a very long time, and the things that they do to like trap a man, get a man, keep a man, like that whole dialogue is just like super weird for me. Yeah, so I just find it. Oh, you're back again. I just find it odd.
Oh no, you left. You actually left. So if you could just repeat your sentence, that was good.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. It's like weird for me.
I saw Kim leave. Huh.
Oh, I left again.
Okay.
I heard you.
Yeah, this whole so I'll admit that so it's because I'm on like vacation a little bit, I've been like watching TV, and not that I'm holding them up as the examples of the African American female experience, but I was watching, what was it? Married to Medicine. And they were having this conversation about what they would do if their husbands cheated. And it's like, you know, people are like, and some of them were like, well, you know, you have to hold up your man and you have to like whatever, and I'm just like, you have to what? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I wonder if and she talks about that a little bit in the essay about like how, I don't know, she didn't use this term, but there's a sense of like fragility around Black maleness that women are meant to. That's where I'm at. I can't do anything about it. I can't answer the phone. It's not my house. So yeah, there's this kind of sense that like Black women are meant to hold up this Black male fragility. Yeah. So that's it. God, you can really tell why I'm single, can't you? Jesus.
Well, in terms of the question, looking at America as a fishbowl, what systems or traditions problematic? I mean, I think at least in terms of systems, some of the things that came out in one of the articles were about the demographic differences, and you know, the high rate of incarceration and undereducation and underemployment and all of those kinds of things that skew the matches between Black men and women. Do create a certain dynamic, I think, that can leave women feeling desperate or like they have to do things in order to hook and keep a man, that really, I think can't be healthy for an individual's mental health, self-esteem, personal dignity, any of that. But the conditions are what they are. And so I said at the beginning of the hour that reading these essays to me felt a lot like listening in on conversations I used to have with women when I was the age of these writers in my 20s and 30s. And so, it just feels to me like we're really kind of stuck in this place. I posted an image with a very thoughtful commentary, I thought, by Oshan Zari. It's an image of Serena with her white husband and mixed baby. And so Oshan Zuri, who's a writer on Facebook, talked about there seem to be a lot of Black men that are upset with the idea of Black women dating, marrying, choosing to be with white men. But Black women had to adjust to that situation years ago. And while it didn't feel good, and we understand why it may not feel good for you now, we did have to deal with it and did have to come to the realization that these are not her words, but generally, the realization that, if we're talking about freedom, people are free to choose whomever they choose. But so in terms of Kim's question about systems and traditions that are problematic, for so long, Black women were determined to either man or no man. And so that created a certain dynamic for us. So, there's a lot of stuff. It's a very complex. Oh, I don't even know how to have this discussion, Kim. It's
tough. It's tough. Hold on. I'm going to come in. Sorry. The lights will go off. Yeah, Michelle, I totally agree. I'm sure that what Kim has asked, I'm sure there are systems. I guess I've just not witnessed good, effective systems. Because most of what I know, I guess I need to go to the literature perhaps, because the personal, if I were to invoke the personal here and looking at, okay, so I'm going to go back to the last part of your question. What systems or traditions are the most problematic for Black feminists to make and maintain? Okay, so yeah, so they're problematic because they require women to diminish themselves. And I just don't know how people responsibly live that way. It's just an irresponsible way of living. And let's not even think about children being in the mix. Much of I did the blocking on Facebook. One of my male Facebook friends and I I knew it was coming to that, but I just didn't think it was going to happen so suddenly, so abruptly. But I just got tired of him like posting these demonizing memes and statistics about Black women, and like he said, like, oh, but a Black woman will have a baby, and then bring that child into a poverty stricken situation. And so I'm like, well, that's going to take two to make a baby. I'm not talking about Black men right now. I'm talking about Black women, but how do you talk about procreating? And you're like, what's the logic there? So I think, especially as when I think about my grandmother's situation, I love my grandfather. I do. And I understand human beings were flawed. But I also know that I am not the kind of woman who could know that my husband has another family and stick around. Like at least the gains, whether I want to attribute them to civil rights or feminist movement, they have made it such that more women and Black women, I know, okay, let's be honest, we've always worked outside of the home, but that we can be self-supporting. And in that, there's just some bullshit that I don't have to, accept, that we don't have to accept, that I think my grandmother had to accept because she did not work. His income was the income. She had really no voice in that marriage. And so anyway, even though I think we create these traditions, and they are definitely problematic, as you've indicated, I also think they're just very irresponsible traditions.
Thank you. I think something else that comes to mind for me is when you look at the AIDS cases and how African American women still, the statistics are on the rise in our communities. So when I read these chapters and it's just like, sexual power, there's a risk to it. And if you are with somebody who is not practicing safe sex, then what Nicole is saying, that's irresponsible. That at some point, yes, you can have your sexual freedom, but there's so many layers to this conversation that it's not as simple as the authors depict it. That your overall health is more important emotionally, spiritually, and physically than your orgasm. I said it.
Okay, so I think the complexity.
I got your back.
So I think the complexity here is, especially when we talk about hip hop feminism. So the complexity is, how do we, as feminists, as self-proclaimed hip hop feminists, who the music has a way, the movement informs the music informing the music, the movement informing the music. I'm not sure, but how do we talk about this? But another a sub-narrative, if you will, is the discussion of empowerment. Like, if we're silent, women are not being empowered to take control, to say, oh no, you need to wear a condom. I know how to put the condom on. I can, I even have my own condoms. Okay, so the silence about our desires and what brings us pleasure will not empower us. So I think it's like a catch-22. It's like this, we're still not getting anywhere. It's also unproductive. And then hip hop, and we do have to be honest, just like, we can go back and look at the music. The music has always, especially Black music, has always had sexuality. I mean, what's so different from Marvin Gaye talking about some sexual healing, and I mean, it's on along the same lines of Beyonce saying, hey, I expect it to be fucked right and good. I want to be pleased. I think what we've replaced here is this hesitance on in behalf of a woman who's generally, it's okay for the man to admit, I want to be pleased and I want to give you this pleasure, and he does the thing. But what we see, especially in hip hop, women are like, okay, I want to be pleased. I seek pleasure, sexual pleasure. I can give, I can receive, I can, I, I want it. I want this pleasure. It's a larger conversation regarding or around desire, and I'm happy about that. I get what Beyonce is saying. Sometimes the sex is so good you want to buy him a Happy Meal or something,
I thought it was Red Lobster.
Right? When you're at her level, Kim, when you're at Beyonce's level, Red Lobster, and she can buy him some shoes. But for some of us Southern gals, we've got to just take him to get a Happy Meal. The special at McDonald's. So, but I'm very happy that we are talking about it. But we have to do more still, because we're still the AIDS crisis. So,
yeah, I definitely am happy that we're talking about it.
Question 3. I'm sorry.
I do think that that more options, women of all ages these days, that there is a greater freedom for women. For women who take it, and and I think that's the key, that nobody really can empower you, that you really have to empower yourself. You really have to decide what concessions, if any, what accommodations, if any. They talked about the BOB, the battery operated boyfriend.
Yes.
As a means of tending to your own pleasure in the absence of having a partner, who truly honored you. And Cooper, of course, writes from the heterosexual perspective. But, I think people that are into other kinds of sexual relationships, it's, still have other options. So while I do think that there are still a lot of barriers, problems, challenges for feminists in finding and maintaining intimate connections, I do think that there are some options that are more available to us today than they have been in the past, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and speaking of the kind of the self-pleasure, So I'm all for that too. Even, in even when you're in a relationship, so-called loving relationship, I think it's nothing wrong with, the B.O.B. Even times if he plays along, if he wants to, or whatever the partner would like that, I think that's okay too. But Nicki Minaj, rapper, kind of broke the internet here. Within the past week? Did you all see that magazine cover where she's like, intimating and menage a trois with her, the threesome with herself, and but it's
Another
with
woman.
herself. So yeah, it's not. It's herself. These are three different images of herself. Yes, and so this very interesting artistry, if you will. So there's been so much discussion around that. She kind of, what they say, broke the internet. And I don't think we talk about self-pleasure enough as Black women with beyond the taboos. Can you all recall when the Surgeon General, right, under Clinton, when she was advocating masturbation? Mm-hmm. And the next thing we knew, she was fired. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I guess it makes me wonder, what is so defective? I think about, I guess in religious context, self-pleasure, but what makes it such a distraction, or why is it so demonized when we talk about Black women and self-pleasuring? I have not been able to unlock that.
Well, I guess because women are not supposed to think they deserve any pleasure.
But it's sensual. It's seen as sensual when white women are, self-pleasuring or kind of portrayed as self-pleasuring. Well, I guess then we're still using those tropes and, of the hypersexualization of Black women, I guess. I guess I'm trying to figure out, why are we not afforded the same treatment? Why can we not also see it as sensual when Black women self-pleasure? I don't really understand that. Nothing to add there, Leo.
I think it's because we're Black, and that the only real understanding of Black women in this country, regardless of who they're seen at, is in some way to be seen as property.
Mules.
And so, yeah. So the way we exist for other people's benefit and for other people's pleasure, and it's as women, it's at their demand.
That makes so much
sense. So that's pretty much it. People talk about like Thomas Jefferson and like slave owners or whatever. Well, some people talk about raping Black slaves. Some people don't call it that. But oftentimes it wasn't without the knowledge of the wife,
right?
And it benefited her.
What'd you say, Leonie?
And it benefited her.
Saying she didn't have to kind of perform those duties if he could go
and make somebody else do it, and still and also he wouldn't have to ask her to do that and degrade her in that way, because he always had a place to go to exercise that degradation. And I think that's true of people who enslaved other people. I think it's true of that. I think also too many Black women experience that in relationships that they have with Black men.
Right. Huh. I agree. Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's threatening. The BOB is threatening in almost in the way that another lover or another suitor would be. Because if a woman or man can get their own shit off, then you're not as dependent on somebody else to do it for you. And that dependency, you don't have to put up with a whole lot of nonsense put up with in order to get pleasure from somebody else. And so this having this thing that you can provide for yourself, it's like a kind of a competition.
Like the techno takeover, the man versus technology concept. Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. That makes so much sense.
I mean, I do find that like it's well, definitely some people that I've been with, they like their egos are easily injured, and it's like if you just listen, first of all,
right.
We can make this situation better for both of us.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I think what's hard for me to fathom is ever being. I'm thinking about, and this is perhaps just a generalization that I shouldn't even be, thinking about or considering. But I think about women of, older generations of women in my family whom I've never met, who passed before I was even born. But I think about accessing pleasure. And I just cannot even imagine being with someone and not feeling comfortable enough to say, oh no, here's this, here's what I like. Don't do that. Do more of that. I can't even imagine a sexual act being one-sided consistently. Like, I just could not. I just can't even imagine that. It's so I guess that's that kind of privilege that I have grown up in a particular time, place, and space. That's not even a part of, my reality. Even though I mean, I know it has nothing to do with.
My mom was into that nonsense. So
yeah,
she was born in 1933. So
was not gonna have it. I know that's right. No. Yeah. I don't know. Should we read it?
And that's why I said, I said earlier, is that Nicole that went black?
Yeah, the light goes. I didn't have my lamp plugged. Okay, I'm back.
One viewer, I wonder if it's Kim who can't get back on. But, I guess that's why I said earlier that it was kind of surprising to me to be reading about women who were carrying all of this guilt and, either remaining celibate out of guilt or having risky sex because they don't want to have an honest conversation about what's going on. And and like you said, Nicole, it would be nice to know how this information presented itself. And I'd like to know what age group.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
she's talking about, because it's hard to imagine modern women carrying on like that. I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense. That does. It really makes a lot of sense.
I guess I am the co-moderator for tonight.
Okay.
So let's take a quick look at question 3. Nicole, would you read that one?
Okay, I'm on my cell phone here. Okay, yes, question 3. It's reported that 70% of highly educated women never marry. Could this be due to partners who do not want to share the intellectual power and the relationship? Is, quote unquote, dumbing down the cost required for long-term commitments for highly educated women? Or there are other options?
Nicole, would you read number 4? Maybe let's consider those two together.
Okay. Some men outwardly profess wanting to be with a certain kind of feminist, progressive, overachieving woman, but many have not done the emotional work required to be with her. And the text states, and there are no societal or cultural structures of accountability that require dudes to acknowledge this, be honest about it, or fix it. The refusal of these kind of men to affirm us, our talents and gifts, one of the intimate ways that patriarchy works to put women in their place. The unspoken sentiment is you may have accomplished X, Y, and Z, but you ain't that great. Have you witnessed or experienced the discouraging man who claims to love feminists? Oh, those are good questions.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Well, I can go first. So I must admit, I find it troubling. I find the term overachieving or overachievers troubling. And the reason why I dislike that term is because I think we all have, there's a way that that we can add to. I don't want to say that we have just all this agency oppressed people in a nation that's still struggling to see us as equal citizens, but there's a trajectory for our lives and what we want to accomplish in our lives. And so I don't think just because I want to pursue, or my desire has always been to pursue a PhD, I don't think people should label me an overachiever. It's just what I want to achieve. And it doesn't make me, I don't think, any different, or my level of achievement. I don't think it needs to be set apart from the person who decides, okay, well, I want to go to school and become a cosmetologist. I mean, we just have different desires and different outcomes, obviously, but the sameness lies in the fact what we've imagined and desire for our lives. So I just hate that terminology. I strongly dislike it, let me say that. The word overachievement. But since it is a part of our kind of cultural imagination, I think that there are men parading to be feminists, but who are, silently or privately disciplining, because that's what I would call it. It's a form of discipline to withhold compliments or encouragement and or to want to, in some type of offhand way, tell a woman, you ain't that great. So for those men who want to discipline in private these women, I do think that exists. I think it exists even in our movement at Black Lives Matter and the outward and the outrage, the uproar, I'm sorry, and the outrage. The fact that 3 Black women are the brain children of this movement and you have two Black men who are consistently interviewed, Sean King and D. Ray, right? So there's always kind of this way of pivoting and placing that male voice above the woman's voice. So they are progressives. I would think they're feminists, I think. I mean, I don't know what they're doing in private, but I'm just saying I know that the culture rewards, and it does not necessarily hold men accountable for doing, things like that. So anyway, let me pass the baton.
So, Kim, we are looking at both questions 3 and 4 together.
That's what I thought. Okay, good.
Yeah, and Nicole is the only one who has responded so far.
Okay.
So let me go back to question 3. Reported that 70% of highly educated women never marry. Is dumbing down the cost required for a long-term commitment. Well, I don't know. Because you all are my long-term commitment.
That's so sad.
If dumbing down is the cost, it's too high a cost for me to pay. I mean, I think that especially where Black men are concerned, they have a lot of issues. Black women have a lot of issues too. But the men's issues is we're all in my view poisoned by this patriarchal capitalist culture that we live in. And so I think that Black men feel like they have a lot of making up to do for all the years that they have not been able to play the heroic patriarchal role. And so for Black women to come along and assert their own agency and intelligence and independence at a time when Black men had not had very long in this country to play the hierarchical papa, was really very difficult for them to deal with. And, and I still don't think that a lot of them have dealt with it. But I don't think that Black women can wait for them to play out their image of the white man's benefit at our continued and perpetual expense. So it has caused a divide in the Black community that is taking its toll, is going to continue to take its toll, and may destroy us in the end. Nevertheless, you know, I don't know that we have any other options. And so, no, from my perspective, the Black community cannot afford to have anybody dumbing themselves down. We need all of the talent, all of the intelligence, all of the brain power that we can possibly muster, working in concert to address the many complicated challenges before us. We cannot afford to suppress or oppress or anybody, or to deny our own gifts and capacities, given the challenges before us. So I understand that women are willing to do that, are willing to dumb themselves down for the benefit of having a man in their life. But I think that we have to recognize those of our weaker links. And yes, I said it, Kim.
What?
Because and I don't say that in a bad way, but what I mean is we don't all have the same gifts, strengths, talents, abilities. We can't all play the same roles. And so there's going to be a number of us that, are not going to be good for X, Y, or Z. And, we're not all going to ever be good for every single thing. So, okay, if you're comfortable being that woman that is willing to suppress your own gifts in order to help another insecure person feel better about themselves, then okay, y'all go do that with some other people in our community who are doing our best to nurture, develop, reveal all of the gifts that we have to offer.
Anyone else?
Yep, I definitely agree. I just wonder, I just see a tumultuous end in those types of relationships. Because here's the deal, hopefully we grow, but we change, right? Throughout the course of a relationship. Like, I'm not who I was 10 years ago. That's a weird dynamic, and that's a labor that I think contributes to all the existing labors that Black women carry. And it's not just in our male relationships. Sometimes it's in our friendships. Sometimes it manifests on a job. That there is this idea that because you are Black, somehow, you're already dumbed down sometimes in public space, right? You can't possibly know what you're talking about. Oh no, you can't solve that problem. Or when students, if I'm in a classroom, you're thinking that, I must be the older student in the class. I'm not the instructor. I just don't, or I can imagine, I've heard Black women talking about those, the ones who are in corporate America, who say that they and are in leadership, and so customers walk in and they want to talk to a white face, and the white face has to say, well, here's the supervisor or the manager or so I think that's very low the notion of Black women, and anytime we contextualize dumbing down, it's very loaded. How do we prevent it from happening in our friendships, right? Because as you all are, avid readers, I don't even know as a teacher, and as someone who grew up working class, I don't know a better way to, I'm not saying it's necessarily our goals to want to have an expansive vocabulary, but reading does that. I mean, whether you intend it or not, reading introduces you to, it has a way of expanding your lexicon. It just introduces you to new words a lot of times. But being avid readers as Black women, and I don't know if you all have grown up working class or, how you grown up, or like if we flip Kim's question a little and see the dumbing down aspect play out in our friendships, like, you know what I'm saying? Or if you went off to school or just doing something different, and so kind of leaving those communities. Does that make sense what I'm asking? Like, have you all, sorry, I don't know what I did there. Can you, okay, sorry. But having encountered that, do you all feel like you've been expected to dumb down even in the context of a friendship with Black women?
It's funny that you asked that, because I can be a little intense. And I absolutely hate talking about extremely trivial things. And it's just in my mind, like, you cannot talk to me about the housewives of Atlanta. And so I get bored really easily in conversations. And I wish I had more patience. And I'm not saying this is because I'm smarter than people. It's just that this is a part of my makeup. And so I could see not always, when I want to talk about something or do something, I pick the people to do it with. So I have like a whole assortment of people, and I'm sure people sort me that way too, because I mean, there are just certain things that you just don't want to invite me to, because then I'll be a wet blanket. But there are other things where I can have a good time, just especially if it's a lot of humor and comedy. I'm your girl. But if you want to talk about, I'm sorry to say this, but if you want to talk about Beyonce and her twins,
and you say that, go on with that. I know that's
so
right.
in terms of certain friends, I have certain friends that will tell you, oh, I was on the subway and there was a girl sitting next to the girl that was sitting next to me. And then all of a sudden there's this winding story that never ends, but there's some nugget that's important to them. I can't do it. And I don't think it's because I'm intelligent. It's because I'm not patient. And I could see some brother coming over saying, she's not listening. She's just not listening. So I might be the anti-reason to go. I cannot take stupid stories that just go on forever. So I think these are character defects of my own.
No, well, I like that.
That problem. I like that. But but I also, my mother used to ask me when I was a young woman why I was always dating a man beneath me.
Oh, now we have to have an off-air. Okay, go ahead.
And I just thought she was so arrogant. And I was like, hey, a scrub needs love too. No, but it's a lot of work. It's really a lot more fun to be with someone who can match you intellectually, or even somebody that may be a little higher, a little smarter than you. You know, because that can be challenging. But to try to cater to the needs of somebody that really is beneath you. And you know, I hate to say it, I hear my mother's voice coming out, and I agree with what you're saying about this idea of overachieving, Nicole. And you know, but I think a part of the reason that idea maintains currency is because we're really not all pushing with the same kind of vigor and determination. And you know, and I guess that's just human, that's just the way it is. But nevertheless, there are these apparent differences. The example that Ken is using of the focus on popular culture. You know, I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt that has the quote, what is it? Some people talk about great ideas, or some people talk about what happened or who happened, whatever.
Right.
You know, that we're really not all on the same page. And so it really is comfortable when you find somebody at least in the same book.
I'm wondering if the authors are talking about bedmates as opposed to relationships, and that if you are kind and caring and skilled, then some of these conversations don't have to necessarily be in the forefront. Because that, you know, when you start talking about multiple lovers and all of this stuff, it just seems like the goal is to have really good sex as opposed to having those conversations that are going to go somewhere.
Well, but they do talk about like really good sex, definitely. But there is also a feminist ethic of care that cannot be sidestepped, that needs to also be packaged, you know, with this really good sex. That, you know, there is no, that can be undone. That I think she definitely made clear that there's still an ethic of care. Like you could be having very good sex and in a violent relationship, or you know, you could be in a good relationship. And I think some of the sex talk was about, you know, needs and naming what we need and knowing what we need and naming what we know. But then the flip side of that, I don't know, you all, I guess for me, the narrative, I think I'm just not over it, don't get me wrong, because I know it's real and it's relevant. But it almost grieves my heart every time we have to face the statistics about educated Black women and not being partnered, to even, you know, the petty debates that I've had on Facebook. Sometimes men whom I'm sure, you know, you were probably somebody's last resort, you know, but they use that, right? They use that like, well, you go ahead and get all that education, but good luck finding a man. Like a wedding ring. It's going to be the end all and be all. And and I think there's a larger conversation we need to have, that, you know, a lot of married people are unhappy and probably in incompatible partnerships. And that's something that we're not, as Black feminists, we're not discussing enough, whether we are in heterosexual relationships or not. So I don't know. This was an interesting. I'm just saying it was an interesting one for me that could definitely, Kim. I think when we have our extended meeting, we have a lot to pull from from this relationship construct.
But I do personally feel that I'll just say this. I just remember being out with a good friend of mine, and when she was with the man she was dating, she just was not the same. She was just saying, "Oh, could you help me with this? And could you help me with that?" And I thought I thought it was like, that's kind of sweet, but I don't think that it could work for me. So every once in a while I'll try something like that. But I just look like I can handle myself. So even when I'm trying to be the damsel in distress, it just doesn't come off right. So I think that ship has sailed.
And why should I love the illusion that Cooper uses in the book, alluding to Steve Harvey's act like a woman, think like a man. Like, why are you expecting men to be authentic, I guess, and be who you are? But then you're inadvertently asking me to not present my whole self, to not be who I am. When he says stuff like men want to rescue and men, Kim, like you're saying, like defaulting to that damsel in distress trope. And when I think about Alice Walker's definition of womanist, I mean, she really handles the damsel in distress trope with from the perspective of what a lot of Black women have had to deal with. It's always like, okay, we come up with a plan. I've got to get it done. Yeah, what she says, walk into Canada. It just has to be done. I'll do it my damn self. So I think this compels me because not necessarily, for myself, but thinking about how I'm raising daughters in this kind of dating economy and what do I tell my girls and the viciousness that, is kind of constructed as women are competing to be chosen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are not things that I thought about when I was solely, just raising my son. Mm-hmm. I didn't think about these things as much, and then with my daughters having darker skin, it's just like, that's a conversation to have. Already that I have to have almost daily to keep affirming them. I don't care what other people say or what the world tells you. You're beautiful and you deserve to be treated with care and respect, and you deserve love. Anyway, it's just complex. Okay. All right, you all. I'm going to pass the baton for real. Let me stop talking.
What I'd like to do, I'm not sure, we don't have that much time left. So I want to just pick one last question. And maybe Nicole, what we'll do is take your lead and take the last question, question 7. Psychology Today ran an article claiming Black women were biologically ugly. As Black feminists, how do you define and promote your own standard of beauty, i.e. style, culture, skin tone, body size, hair, in and out of relationships? And anybody want to start, or I can start. And also, I'm raising a Black girl, and who also happens to be dark skinned, and has a a big round body. And it's how do I just keep letting her know that she is wonderful and just the way she is. But for myself, some days it's easy. Some days it is a struggle. I think living in gentrified Brooklyn here, I think you can look at the economics of how much better we could do as a two income couple, and where those options that opens your life up to. And so when you can't get that new car, I know that it doesn't seem as related, but those are the moments where I wish that the legacy of slavery and racism didn't have such a high price for African American men and African American women, because they're just parts of just having a family, a fully functioning family that is hard to maintain. So what I have to do is look at the family that I do have and love and appreciate it, and find ways to highlight what I actually have as opposed to what I don't have until the unicorn comes, Leonie. Till I get my unicorn. You know. I can't believe I'm a feminist who still wants a unicorn, but some things are stranger than fiction. Anybody else? How do you affirm yourself?
You don't accept the narrative that's out there. It's like, I have the kind of body that people feel that they can walk up and comment on. And, you know, it's like, if I didn't invite your comment, I'm not interested. And I also don't accept the narrative out there that, like, you know, I'm not taking on, for example, fat. Why do I have to take that on as an identity? I am not fat. I have fat. That's the difference. and the struggle is mine. And unless I invite you into that conversation, I don't really need to hear from you, because you have no idea where it came from. You have no idea what the struggle is. You have no idea what my background is. And if you're someone that I want to connect with and you're interested, then I could share it with you, but it's going to have to be on my terms. And if you're someone who's not connected with me, then you don't need to worry about it.
Thank you. I relate.
Yeah. And I agree that that too much time really worrying about what other people think about us, and doesn't matter. You know, what matters is what we think of ourselves. As Leonie was talking, I was thinking, you know, about my whole little romp through deep poverty, and and the kinds of comments that I would get from people unsolicited, and to the point that I started having some really nasty reactions, sometimes out loud in front of them, because I agree, it's very offensive for someone to share their judgment of you when you didn't ask their opinion. And so I think a lot of times within the Black community, because we have familiarity with each other, we take this license to project our thoughts about other people onto them without, seemingly without taking into consideration how it might impact them, how it might hurt them. And so clearly we're acting out some need that we have ourselves to do that to another person. And so, but as the recipient of that kind of judgment, you know, it is critical that we learn to just block it out. And so that's whether it's coming from within the community or outside the community, like the Psychology Today article. You know, but that's a skill. That's a skill that takes time to develop. In terms of my own standard of beauty, I just like, you know, I like natural stuff. I like authentic stuff. I like, you know, all kinds of things appear beautiful to my eye, even though I'm probably the least visual person that you'll ever know. But I personally feel beautiful when I'm just kind of feeling plain and natural. And, you know, I don't know, I guess I decided a long time ago that, you know, I didn't want to spend 8 hours a day doing my hair. I didn't, you know, I didn't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a month doing my hair. And so to me, to do those kinds of things made me so uncomfortable. I was not feeling beautiful. I was feeling accommodating to a world I didn't much like anyway. So I just feel better, you know, when it's kind of me in the trees and God in nature.
I like that, Michelle, the contemplative. I love that. You sound like Alice Walker there. I think this was a very good question and a great one to end the conversation. Definitely. I do remember the fallout regarding that article in Psychology Today, and the writer was an Asian male, right? And so it's like people were asking, what boldness, you know, but that's another conversation about white adjacent privilege and trying to like get to some of the tension between Black and Asian, sometimes those communities that is, you know, loaded and nuanced and complex. After that article was published, like I saw Black women like, well, hell, who wants, you know, it was just, yeah, a lot of mudslinging. So I remember that the fallout regarding that article. But for me, I feel beautiful when I am around people who can affirm me. Those ways that I need to be affirmed, who can greet me in a way that my soul recognizes. I need to be in the company of people whose my soul and their soul, we kind of have a similar flavor, you know, that I can, you know, be myself. And maybe that's because I think I'm on a different journey, as I've been telling, you know, some of my friends, a different spiritual journey. I think it's very much so a spiritual journey. But beyond that, to get to the physical world, when I'm working out, like I liked running. I don't know if this is everybody, but I mean, when I'm exercising regularly, I do like, I don't know, my body seems to want sex more. I don't know what the connection is. But there's something, I think, because exercise has a way of relaxing me, or I'm de-stressing or something. And I'm to get back to that balance. Like since I had my surgery, you all, I have gained so much weight. And I've tried to like talk to my doctor saying like, oh, can you, maybe it's my thyroid, maybe it's something. And she's like, maybe it's the oatmeal cream pies, maybe it's the chocolate chip cookies that I have been doing too much of. I guess I think I'm beautiful when there's this, or I feel, not that I think I'm beautiful, I feel beautiful when I have a balance in my life. And I'm not there right now. Like I'm so out of balance. I know it. I can feel it. And I don't think you all that I'm ever, and I don't even aspire to be like this very thin woman. I don't think I'll ever be that. Like have that Southern, like that shape, I mean, I guess like is associated with Southern Blackness. But it's something that it's not necessarily the way I look is what I'm saying. But when I exercise, it's more so about the way I feel, and so that's what I'm trying to get back to. I've been in like Black Girls Run, which I need to be active again. There's something about being in races, like when I went from the 5K to the 10K to the half marathon. I never went to a full marathon, but I did go to a half marathon. I was slow, very slow. You all, it took me like 3 hours and 15 minutes. Like I'm not fast at all, but you know what I think it is now that I'm talking to you all about it? I was honoring my body. And I think that's it. And then to be honest, good sex does a body good sometimes. And when we have our private conversation, that's another thing we need, our extended, shall I say, conversation. Sometimes we talked about partnerships tonight. But I remember reading, what's her name? Pearl. I can't remember her name, her last name.
Cleaver.
Yes. I know I wanted to say she went to Spelman. I've read a few of her books, and like there's this kind of recurring trope for Black women in love in her book. And so it's like, well, you can be with a good man. Certainly a man who is, a nice man. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's where the mind-blowing sex is going to be. So, so I'm definitely wanting to bring her into the conversation.
But Kim, our unicorn has both, right?
Excuse me?
Our unicorn
has both?
Oh, the unicorn.
As long as I'm dreaming, let's have it all.
Yeah, she kind of opposes it, Kim. She says, like you're not gonna have it all. Like the good sex is probably not coming from the so-called good man. I don't know.
I reject that idea.
Having it all. What about the spirituality of sex?
Well, we haven't talked about it, but I really did appreciate that discussion on touch that came in the introduction.
Oh, yes.
Agree on the importance and the power of touch, and
yeah,
you know, that's just a whole different angle. And
yeah, that was very beautiful.
The intimacy and the vulnerability of that.
Yeah.
But I did just want to say that I am feeling great about myself. I think that is just so sexy, that whatever it is that just is making me feel. Am I frozen again?
I hear you.
Oh, good, because I'm so tired of being frozen. But just that feeling of whatever that thing is to me. And I do find relationships where I grow in the relationships, I find that sexy. That I find absolutely sexy. So I think if I had to choose between one or the other, okay, wait. I can't choose.
What are you saying, Leonie? Leonie's saying something, but she's muted.
She's muted. You're muted, Leonie.
Oh, yeah. No. It's a interesting conversation. I was just sharing it with my house guest. Not my house guest, my host.
So you having a good trip, Leonie?
I am having a good trip.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really awesome. So, I have to kind of go now because I'm out of time. But
okay.
Interesting discussion as per usual.
All right. Well, I'll be up next week talking about ratchetness.
Yay.
Yay, ratchetness.
We'll see you next week. Thank you, everybody. And then we can talk about the first week of December. Ratchetness.
Good night, women.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. So I know it's time to turn off the broadcast, but I just wanted if we could just have a quick conversation about the side chick.
Oh, okay. Let me see.
Okay, can we turn off the broadcast?
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.